All right, well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the 6th week of talks in the GCOOS Spring Webinar Series, where the goal is to share the research of principal investigators funded by GCOOS in our current IU's 5-year award. My name is not Chris Simoniello. Chris, unfortunately, had a last-minute conflict, and I agreed to step in for her. My name is Bob Currier. I think most of you know me. I'm a product developer, research specialist, and co-DMAC manager for GCOOS. So I will attempt to do as good a job as Chris has been doing in the past webinars. So I'll be moderating today's session, which is being recorded. And Jen Vreeland will also be helping to monitor the questions that you can ask by either raising your hand or writing in the chat box. And we're going to try and get through this on time so that there'll be ample time at the end for questions following each presentation. So our first presenter today is Chad Lembke. Chad is research faculty at the University of South Florida Center for Ocean Technology. He is well-versed in IUs and has been a valuable member of both GCOOS and SOCORA. Chad has served on the steering committee that developed the IU's National Underwater Glider Plan and is actively engaged in the Underwater Glider User Group. His work is focused on mechanical and systems engineering, and his skills span a broad range of expertise, including designing the mechanics of sensors, vehicles, and platforms. His prototype engineering and fabrication at COT have led to a wide range of instrumentation, such as coastal profiling floats, ROVs, AUVs, buoys, underwater mass spectrometers, and other chemical and biological sensors. Chad's current focus has been on combining new towed video methods with acoustic biomass technology and mapping sonars for fishery stock assessment. And I've worked with Chad for many years, and I'm happy to count him as a close colleague. And I look forward to this presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Chad.
Thanks, Bob. I'm going to try to share the screen and the presentation. So is that a full screen presentation?
Yes, looks great.
Okay. Thanks again, Bob, and thank you guys for inviting me. My name is Chad Lembke. I'm at the University of South Florida Center for Ocean Technology within the College of Marine Science. I've been here for a bit, and I've been asked to talk to you about our glider program. We've been flying gliders for a bit, and our team, a team of, I'm showing 9 people here. None of these people work full-time on gliders. They all work on other projects as well. 4 of those are students, and the rest are staff members here. And they do everything from electrical engineering and to like I said, the students, and helping out with our public outreach. But most of them help us fly the gliders as well as maintain them and do field work. I'd also just like to point out a laundry list of people that we work with. A lot of those people are faculty members here at USF and at other academic institutions, some NOAA researchers, as well as other people that helped get this program up off the ground over the years. The list could be a lot longer, but I think that's a pretty good list, right? So the nuts and bolts of the program. We've been operating since about 2009. We have 6 operational gliders right now. Our operational range is generally between 20 and 1,000 meters. Most of our gliders have 200-meter buoyancy pumps. We have a 350-meter pump and a 1,000-meter pump. Over that time, we're approaching 30,000 kilometers of distance traveled or areas covered, getting close to 2,000 glider days. Maybe in the next couple of years we'll get up there. And all of our work is primarily in the eastern Gulf of Mexico and the South Atlantic Bight. We do these missions for a variety of reasons. The number one reason, I think, is generally for the national data backbone, providing temperature and salinity data for national models. But our number one local regional stakeholder is HAB monitoring with our neighbors at FWC, Florida Fish and Wildlife Research Institute. I'll be talking about that more in a second. We are also trying to expand into providing data for fisheries managers. And in the past and currently, we try to support event responses, currently with the hurricane intensity forecasting, but also in the past with oil spills, trying to understand where things may be going. Routinely, we collect CTD, fluorometer, and DO. We have one glider that has a SUNA. Most of our gliders have passive acoustic monitoring. We almost always put a VEMCO tag receiver on them, and we have two gliders with calibrated fisheries echo sounders that I'll talk about a bit. So the progression of our work looks kind of like this. Especially with particular focus on the last 3 years, we're getting close to year-round activities. I think this year will be an increase again. We'll be well over 300 glider days if things go well. And then with this data, we store all of our data, but we're willing to share all of it. Those are the parameters that we generally collect. And we generate generic MATLAB plots for all of these. We also have the ASCII data available. We generate KMLs for all deployments, and we do interpolation of the positioning for every deployment. We also do some salinity corrections on some deployments as well. For GCOOS specifically, our first deployments for GCOOS were in 2012. Ann Jokins asked us to do a few. And since then, in 2019, we've ramped up, becoming nearly seasonal. The last several years, doing 4 the last couple of years. This year, we may end up doing a little bit more. Very similar stakeholder delivery. The primary focus has been red tide support, which I'll get into now. Here at USF, we're part of a cooperative. I think you heard a little bit about this from John in previous weeks at Moat. We collaborate with Moat Marine down south of us, but is coordinated by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Research Institute here in Tampa Bay. And USF, we have the USF Center for Red Tide Tracking and Forecasting. It includes a number of faculty members. It's interdisciplinary. We have chemists, physical oceanographers, optical, and biologists on the project, and try to look at the entire system a little bit and provide that information to FWRI for better understanding and forecasting of where red tides may be evolving, not just getting pushed around, but also decay and evolution based on nutrient levels and things of that nature. So a little bit more specifically about that, the GCOOS missions are complemented by missions specifically funded by the state of Florida through FWRI. And what the gliders are responsible for, obviously, is collecting water quality variables from the surface to the bottom across the shelf. Essentially, we start at the 20 to 30 meter isobath and go out to the shelf break and back repeatedly. I think you'll see that in a second. The last year we did, I think 8 or 10 deployments for the last several years. But that's complemented by routine shipboard surveys. You can see that in the bottom right. All the little stations are listed there. The KB8s, 8, 6, 7, 5, and those are all ship stations that are going from shore to offshore. Those do trace metal analysis, and then we get daily projections from the satellite observations of the Optical Oceanography Lab here at USF, looking for red tide relevant signatures in their products. And that is also complementary to the Ocean Circulation Lab, providing circulation dynamics through modeling and then enhanced observations through their buoy network, COMPS buoy network, and bottom mount stations. So with that, we combine all those products to try to ascertain movements of various water column variables in the region, and then how that impacts red tide. The last component of this project is microbial and genomics. That is a new area of research that is being explored to see if we can understand the viral identification viruses that may impact the red tide, and whether or not that will help in understanding the evolution of it in the future. And this is all coordinated by the State of Florida Fish and Wildlife Research Institute. So what that looks like for us, the gliders over the last several years, this is a busy plot, but it shows 3 years of temperature on the top and chlorophyll on the bottom. Those are all individual transects, individual glider deployments. You can see the months of the year across the top, and looking at just the temperatures, the top plot there, it's pretty obvious to see the thermocline that comes. Gets really strong over the summer and breaks down in the winter. You can see the heating and the cooling of the water. You can also see on the bottom in the chlorophyll layers, you can see chlorophyll on the bottom sometimes, and sometimes it blows up. You look in the very bottom right down there, you can see events like in October of 22, that a deployment right after Hurricane Ian came through. So we deployed it in the affluent of the near where Hurricane Ian went ashore. That's why you see such a large chlorophyll signature there. That was huge. There was a lot of river effluent in the water, and we were mapping that area. But seeing these kinds of things, you can see the evolution over time of what the water column is doing, and how it progresses, and how that may impact circulation, especially. Briefly, I want to just touch on the fact that in addition to the Gulf work, we do work with our partners at Catherine Edwards and Harvey Sam and Fumin Zhang at Skidway, University of North Carolina, and Georgia Tech. Apologies, that's the garage door downstairs if you're hearing that. But we deploy over on the East Coast a number of times per year. We've been doing it since 2016. We deploy generally off of Florida or off of Georgia, and meander in and out of the Gulf Stream or up on the shelf all the way up to North Carolina periodically. Again, sharing data with stakeholders as necessary. Another project that we spend a fair bit of time in recent years is the Hurricane Glider effort. If you're not aware, there's been a large effort in the last number of years of sharing water column data with hurricane intensity forecast modelers to better predict the intensification of hurricanes. What that looks like is in the bottom left, you can see a graph there that they are done regularly by one of the team members. It shows the blue line in the middle and the scatter there. That's actual glider data compared to the purple, red, and green plots of models, various models, and you can see real time how well the models are doing versus temperature and salinity. And what's been demonstrated over the last several years is that the models get better with profile data, and that this is not just glider data, it's also floats, surface vehicles, and buoys being added into the models to help those predictions. And this is an IU's-led effort with collaboration from AOML, GOMO, and the Navy contributes assets as well to broaden our footprint of what we're able to do. So the chart on the right, the map on the right is a hope for the coming year where we'll be deploying assets during the hurricane season by, as I mentioned, a number of institutions from the Gulf of Mexico, from Texas A&M and USM, as well as members up the East Coast, such as Skidway and Rutgers and others. And then, of course, in the Caribbean. Something else we got going on here at USF, we have a Center for Ocean Mapping and Integrated Technologies, and we're looking to possibly integrate, at least in a peripheral way, how the gliders may impact and augment mapping efforts. We have two ideas that these are exploratory. We haven't gone real far in this yet, but we're looking at trying to create sound velocity profile information for acoustic mapping efforts, and using gliders to do that, combining that with shipboard and/or autonomous surface vehicles to provide the velocity structure in the water column for multi-beam mapping. We're also looking at attempting to use data from glider altimeters and/or echo sounders, and can you utilize that to provide bathymetry data? Either provide glider bathymetry data or real bathymetry data, or use known bathymetry to back out exact positioning of gliders and develop algorithms to ascertain better where a glider is underwater, since you don't really know in between surfacings exactly where the glider is. If we can better understand exactly where a glider is based on bathymetry, we can possibly develop algorithms to apply to entire deployments. Some of the other sensors that I've mentioned that we have on the gliders, we recently integrated a soda nitrate sensor. This is intended to augment red tide understanding, the nutrient levels offshore. In general, the vast majority of the West Florida shelf is below the detection limits of the soda nitrate sensor, but we do start seeing it quite a bit further offshore, and we're starting to notice differences in different times of year of where those increased levels of nitrogen are. That's likely due to upwelling or downwelling current conditions, and we're looking at figuring out if we can add that to our overall system level analysis of harmful algal bloom understanding. Another thing we've been heavily involved in is integrating echo sounders into our gliders. We have two. We put the first ASL environmental AZFP into a glider. That was done in 2017. And then we have the Simrad Echo Sounder EK Mini on one of our gliders. You can see that in the upper right, hanging up there, the echo sounder transducer is sticking out the bottom of the glider. And so with that, the hope is to be able to get acoustic biomass along the glider path. But in order to get decent biomass values, you have to be able to calibrate the echo sounders, and calibrating an echo sounder on a glider is not a trivial matter. So we've developed two methods. We have a pole mounted system that we call a glider on a stick, that we can attach to a larger vessel on a pole and stick it down, and actually have co-located shipboard echo sounders, so you can do dual calibrations at the same time and do direct comparisons. We've also developed a floating calibration rig that can dangle off the back of the boat or free, and then transmit and communicate wirelessly to the boat so you can do your calibrations. We also spend a fair bit of time on developing some algorithms to compress the data so that we can send acoustic biomass data through the satellite links. Satellite links are obviously much smaller bandwidth than you can then sending full data acoustic biomass data sets back by satellite is really not realistic. So we compress a fair bit of it, and we call them pseudograms. And there's a comparison on the right of data sent back versus what is full onboard storage. You get enough back to be able to see that there's something interesting, but probably not enough to really ascertain exactly what it is. But it does give you enough information to be able to do adaptive sampling while something is out there. And I'll show you an example of that in a few slides. Something else we do, as I mentioned, we have VEMCOs on all of our deployments. We have done some specific VEMCO deployment tagging exercises over the years, but with all of them, we look at this as pings of opportunity for the researchers, the owners of the tags. And over the years, we've hit quite a few sharks and turtles and sawfish and a good number of fish. We share all that data through the integrated tracking of aquatic animals network, the iTag network, and the offshore telemetry network. And when the owners of those tags get the data that they've received a ping, we share any of the glider data with them that they ask for. Since 2000 or since inception, we've been running passive acoustics on our gliders. Did a lot of studies in the early days with looking for red grouper and creating maps of red grouper sounds. You can see that on the right. Most of the time, all of our gliders are integrated with loggerhead instruments, passive acoustic monitors. In the future, we're working now with Bob Courier, who introduced me, and he is developing a new website and hopefully a new auto detection algorithm that we intend on hopefully being able to use all of our data and process all that data. We've given access to all of our old data to at least start filtering out glider noises and start learning a number of sounds. Last thing I'm going to touch on is our outreach. I think it's incumbent upon us to reach out whenever we're given the opportunity. I'd like to note that I got Gandalf up in a local news plug not long ago. That was when we were talking about red tide with a local reporter, and then we also get a bunch of tours in here. Being a university, we have a lot of students that come through, and they always love robots. And we have one student in our college that's been recently been a great help in developing some Instagram videos. So you can see several Instagram videos up on the College Marine Science Instagram page if you ever want to. The link is right there. So going forward, our intent for this, at least this coming year and the next several years, we will continue at least this for the next 3 years. These are cross-shelf transects going from the Tampa Bay area out to the shelf break and back. Starting this year, we're trying to expand that to do some deployments that also go along the shelf break between the Tampa Bay region up to the Panama City region and back. This is a difficult area to navigate. Currents are highly variable, and gliders don't move very fast, so it's a challenge. So we're just doing a feasibility study right now. You can see on the bottom right, that's a Gandalf image from today that shows our 2 gliders out. We have 1 glider in the East Coast for Socorro, and we have 1 out here on the West Coast for GCOOS, and that is currently about 120 miles offshore and it's started to head northwest, and it will hopefully go all the way up towards Panama City and back. And hot off the presses, that those are echograms in the bottom of the image there. Each one of those is a dive. You can see the biomass aggregation near the bottom, the large red blobs that show up in the middle there and then dissipate. So we obviously went over an area of interest in that time period, and that just happened this weekend. So we're real excited about this. We're learning how to use that instrument, and we're learning hopefully some new applications for it. And I'm going to leave it there. I hope I've said something of interest, and always reach out and don't hesitate to give us a shout if we do some things that you may find of interest that you want to collaborate with, or that work that we've done in the past that may benefit your research. Thanks.
Thanks, Chad. Great presentation. Lots of good information there. And I think we have several minutes for questions. I don't see any in the chat channel, but either put your hand up or type in the chat channel. And if you have any questions for Chad before we start with our next presentation. It's really quiet. No questions?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Chad. So now it's time to move on to our next presenter. I'd like to welcome Dr. Chunyan Lee. Chunyan is a professor, a Mobile Distinguished Professor of Marine Geology in the Department of Oceanography and Coastal Sciences at Louisiana State University. Since 2011, he has been the director of the Wave Current Surge Information System, WAVCIS. His work spans a range of topics that include physical oceanography, estuarine dynamics, severe weather-induced ocean response, land-ocean exchange, and impacts of climate change. Chunyan spends a significant amount of time training the next generation of oceanographers. He's been recognized for outstanding teaching in the numerous undergraduate and graduate courses he offers in oceanography, coastal weather, and ocean data analysis. He also routinely engages in Louisiana STEM programs, working hard to broaden the participation of groups underrepresented in STEM disciplines. His talk today is titled WAVCIS, Status and Prospects. All yours, Chunyan.
Can you see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Yes.
All right, good afternoon. First, I would like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to the continued support of GCOOS throughout the years, including the new leadership under Dr. Jorge Brenner for all the funding support, technical support, meeting organizations, and networking. I also would like to express our appreciation to the support from several funding agencies, including IOS, NOAA, National Science Foundation, and Louisiana CPRA, BOEM, and Water Institute of the Gulf, as well as LSU and Coastal Studies Institute at LSU, and our College of Coast and Environment. I also would like to take this opportunity to give credit to the late Professor Greg Stone, who started WAVCIS, and also Mr. Bill Gibson for their great contributions. They should be remembered. WAVCIS is abbreviation for Wave Current Surge Information System. The first stations established sometime around 1997 and 1998, way before my time. And it was established by the late Professor Greg Stone. Basically, what it does is it's a combination of a few stations offshore based on oil rigs, oil platforms, and for real-time meteorological and oceanographic, basically physical oceanography parameters, and data transmission near real time at hourly interval to GCOOS. So my talk basically will be around the three questions GCOOS gave me. So the first question is, what is GCOOS funding us to do? Well, these are the tasks that we were going to do under the support of GCOOS. As first is to maintain our server, our computers, ensure functioning, especially during bad weather, and also do some preliminary QA/QCs for the data we received near real time, and also real-time data reception and relay to GCOOS and to NOAA, and also maintenance of the data link or the satellite link. If we have any problem with the data link, we should fix it. And more specifically, we are maintaining one station at what we call CSI 6, which is at 20 meter, about the boundary between the inner shelf and middle shelf. Maintain the system and the sensors. So these are the station, a few of the stations. We have a few older stations, but the circle, the red circle is CSI 6. That's the one that we are trying to maintain with GCOOS support. And then the dimmed red circle 10 is our newer station CSI-10 based on the oil platform at water depths about 13 or 14 meters. The second question we will ask is what areas of the GCOOS strategic plan does our work most closely align? Basically, I think it's closest to number 2, the coastal hazards, because we're more interested in obtaining data for the physical oceanography and weather data under severe weather. That includes mostly tropical cyclones, meaning hurricanes or tropical storms, and also atmospheric fronts. Those are associated with extratropical cyclones or just air mass coming from the north, from the Arctic, and coming through the region, covering a large area, making a lot of waves, transporting sediments. Our data are also used by other people, by modelers, by other people to serve the other key focus areas. So it's kind of tied to number 1, marine operations, and number 2, the health of the ecosystems. For instance, the current we measure has been used for understanding of the stratification evolution under the influence of weather and river discharge and tide, even though tide here is relatively small, but modulates the motion. So the stratification change, especially in summertime, disturbed by hurricanes, that has some implication to the evolution and conditions of hypoxia. So the third question, which is what I'm going to focus most in today's talk, is how is our work advancing observing and or monitoring capabilities in the Gulf of Mexico? So I have 3 items to talk about. First is what have been done in the last 10 years and what products have we produced and what's our next phase plan for the next few years. After I took over WAVCIS about 10, 11 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, we realized that the station is getting a little bit old and kind of cumbersome in the sense that it requires a large dish. Antenna dish is huge. If there is a wind event, there's a hurricane, and it may move, so it's misaligned, then you don't have real-time data transmission. And also on-site, the sensors, computers, there's an on-site computer that requires continuous cooling. So these are kind of a challenge to maintain. So the idea that we had about 10 or 12, 10, 11 years ago was see if we can somehow optimize the system to make a kind of automated observing system that we don't have to have an on-site computer. We don't have to rely on cooling system because once you have a computer, you have to have climate control, make sure you don't have too much moisture, too much heat, stuff like that. So the first thing we did was we looked around for vendors, for technologies, and we tested one setup to do automated observations, data transfer using satellite. We did it at Caminada Pass at the southern Louisiana. The deployment was done between September 15th, 2014 to December 31st, 2015. And it was almost a perfect test. So the data are pretty much continuous, all high quality data. We could intervene real time with the software package that we can change the sampling interval real time remotely just through internet access. Then we try to implement the technology to what we call Station 10. So Station 10 is at Ship Shoal, is southern south of the Timberline Terrebonne Bay at a water depth of about 13, 14 meters. So the project was funded by BOEM in 2016, and we were successfully, we installed the instrument successfully in 2018, starting to collect data, and we collected quite a lot of tropical cyclone data, hurricane data, and atmospheric frontal events until Hurricane Zeta, which was September, I think it was September 2020, which damaged the platform, damaged our conduit, the infrastructure, and the cable. So we lost communication. We didn't know what happened, the status, until we went back later, much later. But the platform was damaged and evacuated, so nobody was allowed to board. So we were not allowed to board, to fix things, or check things until later. We went back. I think it was after April of 2021. We recovered the instrument. It went dead on March 24th after the corrosion to the cable and everything. So it went dead on March 24th. This is the example, not the example, the entire test data set. You can see there are only 2 small gaps when the battery went low before we were able to replace the battery. That's still the data, the velocity data at different beam. So the beam size is about 2.5 meters, and it can allow us to have 40 beams cover about 100 meters laterally. So this is a picture of the new system. The ADCP is kind of custom made so that the beams are off to one side that can avoid the influence from the rig structure. And then we have a solar panel to charge the battery. And then the red box is an omnidirectional antenna. So we get rid of the big dish antenna completely. Okay, so this is using Iridium satellite transmission for the data. This is the picture of a diagram of the platform we used to install the station, install the sensors. So the station is Ship Shoal Block 91. We call it SS91. It's a station 10. All right. We had to move the antenna a few times to make optimized data reception. At the same time, we installed a second station, almost identical at coastal inlet Barataria Pass. Okay, so this is just a picture of showing the data covering about 100 meters. And this is the time series of the data. And we were able to, like I said, real time modify the time, the sample interval between 5 minutes and 60 minutes. Usually we sample at the 15 minute. So with the station 10, even though it's not functioning now, but the short lifetime of 2 or 3 years, we were able to cover quite a lot of data. And it happened that 2020 was a year of very active tropical cyclone activities. We captured almost all of them until Zeta. So we covered mostly the 2019, 2020 tropical cyclones, including Tropical Storm Gordon, Hurricanes Michael, Barry, Laurel, Hannah, Marco, Beta, Delta, until Zeta, when our cables were damaged, communication stopped, but still worked collecting data for some time before it went dead completely. We also captured dozens of events of atmospheric frontal passages. Here I'm just showing some sample data. Not as perfect as this one when we did the test at the inlet, but it still worked pretty well with some gaps. These gaps in the beginning are before we move these antenna to a more optimized location. This is about station 6. Station 6, we still have real-time data coming through now, mainly the weather data, which captured a unfortunate event, capsizing of a Sea-Core power boat on the 13th of April 2021. Unfortunately, at the time, CSI-10 was already down, so we didn't have data from station 10, but we did get the weather data capture showing that the gust wind tripled over like 20 some minutes short time period when the boat was capsized. Okay. In addition to the real-time data, we have cheaper ways to to get data without getting the real-time data, but we deployed quite a few sensors funded by other projects, especially for the project funded by National Science Foundation for Meteor Tsunami project. That here you see an example of the data. Each file is kind of big. It's 1.4 gigabyte for each file, roughly. Sometimes we get 2 or 3 gigabyte data, depends on how long we deploy it. The Meteor Tsunami project was trying to look at the meteor tsunami produced by the atmospheric forcing. So at the lower picture or diagram showing an example of this kind of feature, you have a solitary wave. Then follow that, you have a bunch of oscillations, conoidal waves generated in the shallow water by atmospheric forcing. The lower left is a reanalysis weather map, the surface map of Hurricane Michael. So in addition to these, we also have several efforts to collect data, just ship-based surveys, get the current profiles, hydrography, nutrient, sediment, even including microplastics with collaborations from other institutions. So on the left-hand side, lower left is just an example of a sampling of a vertical profile of the horizontal velocity along a 30-kilometer transect in early March of 2021. We repeated 12 times so that we can resolve the variation of the transport. Interesting to see that the transport tripled, actually changed 3 folds within 36 hours. So the coastal current was affected by a high pressure system post a cold front. We also do some modeling, try to use our data combined with models, especially using Earth, and that's for weather, and FECOM, that's for hydrodynamics, and Delft 3D for coastal areas, including sedimentation. The lower panel shows an example of some work we did in Lake Pontchartrain. So we're also interested in the small bays, lakes, looking at the wind-driven and the river-driven, buoyancy-driven circulations. We're also looking at the climatology. So one of the results is showing here, just as an example, showing the long-term variation of the atmospheric cold fronts influencing the Louisiana coastal areas. And the graph shows you that over a 40-year period from 1977 to 2016, with about 1,600 frontal events. We see a kind of increase trend, even though it fluctuates quite a bit, but there is an increasing trend on average, except the summertime, because summertime cold front is kind of rare. Every year we have like a 41 plus minus 5 frontal events. We also look at the hurricane impact of the hurricane. So that's just a diagram showing a table showing the we examined the past 30 plus years of events. We were able to capture much of the events in 2020, 2019 with our station. And look at the two peaks, 2005 and 2020. So we were able to capture some of these high peak events. So what's next? We were fortunate to get some new funding recently through GCOOS to do a hurricane repair project for the next 2 or 3 years to bring back the two stations fully functional with the CSI 6 and CSI 10 with the weather data as well as the physical oceanography data. And we're going to do more modeling studies. By the way, we have been also doing a lot of the coastal stations. That's inshore at the tidal inlet, at the mouth of the bays, Barataria Bay, Vermilion Bay, Calcasieu Lake, Wax Lake Delta, and the Lake Pontchartrain. Those tidal inlets, we deploy ADCPs, horizontal ADCPs looking sideways. Only 2 of them were real time, even though these stations are already done, finished with the project ending, but we may go back and reestablish some of the stations again in the near future. So that's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chunyan. That was a very interesting presentation, and I'm looking to see if there are any questions. I don't see anything in the chat channel, but we'll take a few minutes and see if anybody does have a question. Put your hand up or type in the chat channel. I'm not hearing any questions, so going once, going twice, going 3 times. No, I don't hear any questions, so I think we're gonna wrap up. And I'd like to thank Chad for all the great work that he's done with glider operations and particularly red tide research in the Gulf over the years, and to Chunyan in particular for your work with the younger generation of oceanographers that are up and coming. That's such a critical resource, and making sure that they're trained and excited about doing science in the future is really important, because if we don't have new ones coming along, then all this work that we're talking about during our webinars isn't going to continue to get done. So thank you for that. And thanks, Jen, for all the technical support, and our wonderful PR professional, Nadine Slimak, and all of our attendees today. I think it was a really interesting presentation. Lots of technical details today. They were both pretty tech heavy, which is really nice to see. And next week, we hope to see you again for the 7th, I believe, GCOOS webinar. And that will be Dr. Bob Laban of the University of Colorado Boulder, and talk about the development of a nutrient sensor network, which I want to make sure I watch that, from Dr. Beth Stauffer of the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. So once again, thanks everybody for attending. I think we had a great turnout and two very strong presentations. Thanks, Chad and Chunyan, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a nice day.